All right, let's make a start, everyone. Thanks for coming back. So this is going to be a much less formal session. There is much less structure and so on. This is really an authoring question and answer session. So let's go back to the workshops, getting started. We're back in, this is where we were today. Now you've had a chance to work through the Author Quick Start Guide. It's an opportunity to check in and to get some more help. So if some of my more experienced colleagues are here, we can put people into breakout rooms and actually chat about particular issues if you'd like to do that. I have posted a couple of things at the bottom. A project that we had last year, a collaboration between the Open University, Loughborough and Edinburgh, was to produce a stat guide. So some people actually prefer PDF-based documents. And so as part of that project, we produced an actual kind of published manual that complements the authoring documentation that is online. One of the things that you'll notice about the authoring documentation system is that it's actually part of the system. So if you look at the URL up here, it's actually part of the server. So the big advantage of that is if you've got Stack installed in your own institution, the documentation is the documentation for the software that you're actually running on your server. So if somebody talks about a feature and you go in and look at the features. So a feature I added very recently was an ability to typeset tables, treating tables as a mathematical object, which is just a list of lists like matrices, but they're typeset in particular ways. And when you're providing feedback to students, you can highlight differences in tables in an attractive way. Now, you might want to use those, but if your institution hasn't upgraded, this won't work. So you can find out which version you're running by looking at the documentation. And if you really want an authoritative answer, the version of Stack you're running with the optional libraries that you may or may not have chosen to install on your version is listed on the bottom of the documentation page. So the big advantage of this kind of documentation is you get the documentation for the software you're actually running, whereas the Stat Guide is of course a fixed PDF document. So we're already a year later and we've made some big improvements. That's just the nature of documentation, isn't it? The advantage of this is it was carefully written and it's a nice attractive document and it was written with you folks in mind. So please have a look at that. That might be, somebody was asking about Maxima. There are all sorts of stuff about here, about how to use Maxima, useful Maxima commands and so on. So this is one place to look. Another place to look, a separate document that we produced as part of that project were the case studies. These are the Stack case studies and a whole bunch of ways people have been using Stack, details of how that all works. I have boxes of lovely printed versions of these PDFs, which are, sitting in my office undistributed and unloved. So if in future you would like a printed copy of the case studies, I'd be happy to send them out once I can get back into my office. Right, so what we'd like to do really in this session is just do questions and answer and respond to people's concerns or questions and work in a very informal way. So over to you folks, really. I shall look through the, I shall start by looking through the questions and answers that we've got in the forum. We suggested that a good place to put your questions and answers is here. We've already got a couple of questions and answers in here. So there was an answer, Simon asked about authoring a text document. Is there a text-based markup language for Stack? And it's on the list, it's on the roadmap. I've got some prototype code, but we haven't released that yet. So it's not ready. There are some advantages in having a markup language. We want to put questions you can copy. Once this is working, we will have copy and paste of parts of the question and also putting questions under Git control. So that's on the roadmap, but we haven't done it yet. Yeah, The XML, okay, we have an XML question, but that's not really human readable. Let me just show you that then, since people are asking about it. Let's go to the authoring guide, workshops, not workshops. We're in here. So this is one of the common things about Stack, is that we completely rely on the way Moodle does things. So for import and export of questions, we completely rely on the way that Moodle does that. That has huge advantages in that all the other questions, all the other question types are dealt with in the same way. So if you export a whole category, you'll get the Stack questions and any other questions that you've written. There are some downsides to that in that it's a Moodle XML, and that's kind of proprietary to Moodle. So the Ilias people, it's not their format, although you can load Stack questions in Moodle XML into Ilias, and all the other question types. So if you just want to export a single question because you can't figure out how to do something and you want some help from a colleague by emailing it to them, you can just go into the question, and you'll notice there is this test page. Now, we're going to talk about question tests and so on more on Friday, but you can just export a single question by clicking on that link, and that exports a single question. And that is now the Moodle XML of the question. So that's one text-based format for importing and exporting questions, and it's not really designed to be read by a person. Some of the newer versions of Moodle have an export a single question option on the quiz page, but as you can see, we haven't got that. We haven't got that facility here yet because we're running an older version of Moodle, so that will rather depend on your version of Moodle. The other option is that you can export a whole category, so good reason for organizing your questions into categories. If you want to, these are the sample questions, they're actually copied from the demo course, but if you export, if you go into the export in here and you choose Moodle XML, and we won't bother writing where they're from, and we can export the whole category then, sample questions, and you just export the category, and that will download all the questions as the again, as a Moodle XML, and then you can re-import them using the import option, which is here, and you have to choose Moodle XML, and you can import your questions. So import and export is all perfectly well supported. This brings up another question that was asked over here, which was images in the plain text editor. So this started off as a discussion about how can you embed images in the plain text editor. Well, you can't, you need to use one of the other editors. But again, what we've done is we've piggybacked on the whole Moodle system for handling images and other embedded things in text. So Moodle has a whole system for managing images and texts and putting images and things. And the big advantage of just going with that system, regardless of its, what can I say about it? It's a particular design and they've done it a certain way and all the rest of it. And we've piggybacked on that because I don't want to reinvent the wheel. The advantage of using the Moodle system for import and export of images is that when you export your images is XML, the pictures get wrapped up in a certain way that's XML safe and transmitted with your questions, right? So by piggybacking with all of that, I haven't had to ever worry about how if you upload a JPEG into your question, I don't have anything to do with that and I don't care. Right, I really don't. I really don't want to be involved in that. So that's the thing about images. There's a whole basic thing about images. We recommend SVG. SVG works very well for images. So when Maxima produces some images for you, those are now SVGs. We also recommend JSX Graph for interactive graphics rather than other formats. So we're supporting SVG and JSX Graph. and lots of decent desktop software will output as SVG, and then you can paste the SVG directly into your stack question, and it will scale nicely and so on. Okay, other questions that were here. Maxima on shared hosting. Well, I can't help, I'm afraid, with hosting. That's something you have to take up with your institution or your host.
I wonder, Chris, could you say maybe a bit more about that? Because there was definitely, I was dipping into some of the breakout rooms, and there were definitely some questions about how can I get hold of this. You know, it's all very well being able to edit questions on our demo server, but if I really want to use this in my institution, what do I need to do?
Yeah, you need your institution to install it. That's the simple answer, and there's no shortcut to that. There are some commercial hosters who have added that, and we are teaming up with Adena in Edinburgh, who are looking into whether they will offer that as a commercial service. Stack's open source, so you can be confident. You can be confident that there's no way anyone can turn around now and close off the source code. It's just there are too many contributors. There's no way. There's Alto, there's the Open University, there's Edinburgh, there's Birmingham. There's a whole bunch of institutions that have contributed to the system over the years. And the copyright and IP is, by design, entirely mixed up. So there would be no way for someone to come along and dual license this in a commercial way. It's just not possible. So you get that for free, but there's no such thing. I mean, that's free as in freedom, not as in free beer. And if you want to use this, then you need a server, and running servers reliably costs money, and that has to be paid for. So that's either your institution or a hosting company will do that for you. That's the way it is. Yeah. And
is there more of a kind of practical guide for people about what they need to tell IT people? Maybe Sam wants to chip in with how they got on in Durham as well.
Yeah, sure. Well, the short answer is the full installation instructions are in the normal place in the instructions. And competent IT people will be able to follow that. It's an entirely standard Moodle plugin. So you just need, well, it's not entirely standard. It's a Moodle plugin, and you also need to put Maxima on the server, and that's the additional bit. Sam?
Yeah, so we are running a Moodle server in our department. So we set that up at a departmental level. And because that was how we were going to test it to start with. And once we were ready to kind of use this more seriously, we approached our IT team and said, look, we've got this Moodle server that we're running, and we know that we can talk to Blackboard via LTI. Can you set up an LTI link? You know, can we talk about how to set up that link between Moodle and Blackboard? So we haven't asked our central IT team to set up a Moodle server or to set up Stack. We did all of that ourselves in the department. We just then asked for help connecting that to Blackboard.
Yeah, that's pretty much what we've done in Edinburgh. The maths department is running its own small Moodle server, and we've connected it up to Blackboard. Would it be worth me just demonstrating the way the connection works? Is that reasonable? Yeah, okay, so share screen again. So I shall go into, it's called Learn in Edinburgh. So this is the course that I run. I'm logging in with my typical credentials. So I log in and list of courses that I'm involved in. So here's my 19 to 20 Introduction to Linear Algebra course. And I've got all the course materials in the institutional environment, which is, as you know, as you'd expect. And then somewhere, if I can remember where I put it, is my assessments. And we have this link called Online Assessments. And when you click on this, it automatically takes you over into the Moodle server. And what we've done is every course on Learn. So we don't call it Blackboard, we call it Learn. It's branded as Learn. So every course on Learn has a shadow course on this server, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to log out of this server. So you have a shadow course, and all the users come through. All the users come through as I probably shouldn't be showing you students, but anyway, all the users come through as users, right? I certainly won't show you any marks, right? So now I'm going to log in as a Moodle admin with superpowers, and that you actually can't. The only way to log into this particular server is through Learn. You can't through Blackboard. You can't log in any other way. And what we have is we have a whole bunch of courses that are using. So we've now got over 100 courses that have put a Stack connection in for their course. Not all of these people are really using it. There's Joe's testing course, for example, as you would expect. But in here somewhere, if I go to categories, where's the categories? Oh, we put them all in the same category. Okay. What happens is we developed a special plugin at Edinburgh called the course enrollment plugin. And this is so again, it's on, if you go to GitHub Maths, there is a course enrollment plugin. And what this does is it allows you to connect a institutional virtual learning environment up to Moodle in a much more transparent way. And in particular, it allows you to clone a template course. So once you've installed this plugin into Moodle, so typically when you expose a service by LTI, everyone will get the same service. So if I expose one course through LTI, then everyone will see the same course. Whereas this allows you to clone a blank course that will then run in parallel to the courses that you're running on your institutional Blackboard, right? So the advantage of that is that it just removes all human intervention from the loop. Once that's set up, anyone in your institution can click on that assessment link, and the first time they click on it, they'll get a blank course to work in. And anyone that comes through will get the same privileges. If you're a teacher on the Blackboard side, or if you're a teacher on the other side, you'll be a teacher on the Moodle side. And if you're a student, you'll come through as a student, as you would expect. So that just saves a lot of hassle. That's how it works. So yeah,
and that's the same tool that we're using in Durham. And that's what I mentioned earlier, that we borrowed that from the Edinburgh guys. So we just installed that plugin, and that's exactly how we use it.
Yeah, I regularly talk to there was, of course, IT support. I regularly talk to your counterparts in IT at different institutions. And we do have a setup script that builds the entire server. You just have to type in a couple of passwords and a couple of other bits of information. But from a blank server, we have built that entire server architecture that you saw me demonstrate there. And that's for obvious business continuity. We need to have a complete written record of exactly how the server's set up, so it's done through a script that will install it. And we have agreed to share that script with other institutions who've asked on occasion. We don't want to publish it online just because there's nothing confidential in it, but it's just our own personal setup script, so there's no benefit to us publishing that. But if it helps out your colleagues and shows them what to do, it's much easier to show an IT professional a script to install something. They can read through that and pick and choose from it what they want to do at their end, and that's their business to support it. Now, I'm an academic member of staff, and my primary interest is education. So when it comes to server support, I start to look to hand that over to experts who can provide that for us. But I regularly deal with those folks. So if you're in an institution that hasn't got Stack yet, we will help, and I can help talk to them. Yeah. Right. Okay. Let's move on with some of the other questions. Where are we? Let's log out of there. I've completely lost my thread now. Authoring. Yeah. Curve catching questions. I was joking when we were setting this up. I was joking about, we always get the same questions in workshops, because I've been running these workshops face to face for many years. I could have predicted the curve sketching question, and I could have predicted the hosted question doesn't come up in face to face workshops, but the curve sketching question. Ian, let's just go in and look at that. the documentation suggests that getting Maxima to produce figures is possible but tricky. Randomized curve sketching question. So Ian, are you online? Because you've just posted this. Do you mean getting the students to sketch their answer?
What I was thinking by this was present the students with a function and asking them to identify crucial points, for example, and then presenting them with figures that showed how the function may behave near those points and asking them to choose which was the correct one. So I think this is the way we tend to teach curve sketching, is identify crucial points and talk about the behavior near those points.
Okay, fair enough. So there's always the question about, can you assess a freehand sketch type stuff, which we're working on but haven't really got a robust solution to. George, you taught this topic. Do you want to come back? Do you want to prepare something and come back and answer that in a moment?
Yeah, I was just looking around because there's a week of my fully online course available, which is on the demo server, so I could just maybe show a section of that. So I'm just flailing a bit because I'm meant to be controlling Spotlight as well as everything else. Turn on my screen sharing.
While George is doing that, we've got some breakout rooms. So if any, I appreciate there are a lot of folks sitting here. There's nearly 70 people sitting here. If anyone would actually like to talk, stuck with some question authoring and would like to move into a breakout room, just drop us a message and we'll put you in a breakout with room someone else can help to try and parallelize this. So that might be just an option if you really want to. Okay, George.
Okay, so this is on the demo server. I shall add a link in so it's easier to find from the course that we're in. But in principle, this is here. You can sign up and get access to this. So this is 1 week of a 10-week course that I teach for our first year students. And this is doing exactly that. So it's to do with graphical type questions. And just to show you the sorts of things I've been doing. This is really just a note. So the whole course is in here. So this is the course note about sketching quartics in this case. And then here's so I like a multiple choice question every now and then. But this is all randomized. So let's try it actually. If I just say which one is that, just almost at random. Okay, so I got that one wrong. The way I've got the quiz set up, the students can try another question. So it will just take another random version with different routes. And the graphs get swapped around in order as well. So this is using the Maxima's own graphing feature to produce the graphs. But I do also have, that's just a static image. This one here is a JSX graph, which is the other thing that Chris mentioned. So again, this question is fully randomized and the graph updates to reflect that. So I don't know if that completely answers your question, but those sorts of features are there. I have been getting into JSX graph a bit more and experimenting with, you're able to have points on here that students can drag around and that can form their answer. So if I've got a minute, I'll maybe just find an example of that and share a link as well. Okay.
Thank you. If I could just ask about that briefly. Do you have any idea about the accessibility issues with the plots? I'm assuming the Maxima is essentially totally not, but I don't know anything about JX graph.
So the output of both, I think, is SVG. So the settings that we've got on the way the Maxima plots are generated, they produce an SVG file. So you can kind of zoom into that in quite high detail. And the same with the JSX graph. In terms of accessibility, I guess that gives you some benefit in that you can zoom in and see it at quite high detail. Where you've got someone with visual impairment, I'm not sure how useful it would be. There's a question popping up in the chat, what about alt text? I don't think that's provided for the JSX graph by default, and I can't remember about the maxima plots. I think it's there. Chris, can you save me?
Yeah, I can save you if I can switch on my mic, sorry. Yes, so accessibility. I was just wandering off around the documentation because we have a dedicated page to accessibility. I mean, it really is an important issue, and it's one that I want us all to stay on top of if we can, as much as is possible. I mean, it is often a moving landscape. So accessibility is under students, I think. Did we put it under students? Yeah, accessibility. So here is the docs page on accessibility. I mean, it's very short because we have hooked into all the Moodle things, and Moodle addresses accessibility at that level. Alt text is provided, and that's under the section on plots. So that's under CAS plots. Alt text, so it does automatically provide alt text. So let me show you that actually. Let's just see what it does. So if I show you how to include a plot, this is just a simple, because I'm the site administrator, I get access, oh, I messed that up. I get access to this page, the question type page, and from there is a link to this little scripting page, which allows me to just test out the scripting. So this is some text, and we can put in some maxima commands. And I mentioned earlier in the question authoring that these commands will get evaluated and they get sent to the computer algebra system. So it's just a good way of me playing about. So if I plot x squared, where x goes from -2 to 2, I can get all my brackets right first time. I think it looks okay. And this is what the plots look like. And yeah, so as George was saying, you know, these do zoom, because they're SVGs, they scale quite well. And where is the alt text on that? Now, how do I find alt text? How do I find alt text for SVGs? Do I inspect it? Yeah, so here is those alt text as I expected. The stack auto-generated plot of x squared with parameters x is -2 to 2, right? So there is alt text that explains what the thing is and what its parameters are. Now, yeah, you should know about that, because that's, you know, potentially a problem if you're asking the question, what's the graph of this function, right? Or what's the expression? Guess the expression of this graph. You know, that's not great. So mostly we want that by default for accessibility, but then there is an option in the plots for removing the alt text. Here we are, stack auto-generated plot. And then you can set the alt text to be whatever you want to override that, to make sure that you're not giving the game away in the question by asking them to sketch the graph. Yeah, now I don't know. I don't know the legality of those kinds of things, so I won't say any more about that. If you're then not providing that in an accessible format, that's something I'd have to take advice on, I guess. But
I think that's an issue, because part of the, I guess, your learning outcome there is interacting with the visual representation. So it's kind of hard to imagine the alternative to that.
Can I just add one thing as well, which is one thing we've done that we do in Durham, or at least most of the time, is wrap the question text in a div with a particular class called accessible class. And then in Moodle, you can add some custom CSS. So we can set up some styling to style classes with my accessible class. So we've kind of tweaked some of the CSS for stack questions by doing that. That might not be the easiest way to do it, but that was a quick fix I came up with at some point.
okay, I mean, what I would, you know, people do this because it's quick fixes, and you'll all be tempted to do that. It would be great, Sam, if you could contribute those back. partly because the Open University have already reviewed Stack as a plugin with an accessibility view. And if you're, I mean, the stuff moves so quickly, and I've been doing this for 10 years, and stuff moves and things change, and it would be great to get features like that into the core so everyone can benefit from them. So I mentioned this publicly just because you'll all be tempted to do things or change things, or there will be institutional guidelines that you want. So let's discuss that and get it in the core. This is a good moment to plug Talmo. I'm very grateful to the Talmo folk for setting up the Zoom meeting and supporting us in this way and sending out the publicity. There was an excellent talk at Talmo on accessibility. So if you folk didn't see that, I would suggest you you have a review of the video for that. The colleagues who spoke at that meeting are the people I would go to for advice on this, because it's not my area of expertise and it's an area where expertise is needed. So I think that'd be a good place to go to get some other answers on the accessibility question. Okay, anything else on that? Fine, let's look. I was looking at some of the other questions in the chat, which were, again, I've got to navigate back now. Sorry, folks. Right, back down to the question and answer. So I noticed this "how far can you get" question, which comes up a lot. Okay, well, it was designed with calculus and algebra and methods-based courses in mind. What about other subjects? Group theory, rings, field theory, graph theory. So please post your experiences here. There are libraries, there are various libraries of functions, so I'm happy to review those. There is a graph theory library in Maxima, which for technical reasons we can't use, unfortunately, and I've documented that elsewhere. So you can't use the graphs package. It would be great if somebody would rewrite that in a way which could be useful, but there we go. I think Stack is by design strongest where the answers are these kinds of traditional mathematical expressions. And Robbie will be talking about, my colleague Robbie Bickerton will be talking about assessing proof on Friday. And that is pushing the boundaries of how we can use these tools to assess proof. And that will certainly be useful in some of the courses listed here. But please, folks, come back and answer this question if you've got some other experiences. Feedback and response trees. So Daniel asks, I found that the potential response trees end up very complex. Well, yeah, they do, because every time you want to create a distinction in Stack, every time you want to test something, every time you want to create some kind of test, you need to add a test, and that increases the size of the tree. So again, it's a really subtle design decision as to whether we have libraries of functions which do very general things, or whether you as an individual question author on a question by question basis have to program that in. So the demonstration example with the integration answer test, the integration answer test provides a whole bunch of feedback. And I decided that that should be a core supported function because it's used so commonly. The physicists were asking me for functions that deal with floating point numbers regularly. So if you find yourself writing 40, 50, 60 questions, and the questions all have the same huge potential response tree, then let me know, and we'll talk about providing an answer test that does that for you. I'm sorry if that all sounds a bit responsive rather than proactive, and I hope a lot of the tools that you need are there already. And I hope you don't write 50 very complicated questions without checking that it hasn't already been done in a simple way, because you might find the code already exists, which would be a shame. But it's necessarily a complicated thing. What were the other question and answer questions? Equation as an answer. So yes, you can have an equation as an answer. Topic examples. What's Tom asking? So the answer to that, Tom, is to look at the Abacus consortium. So colleagues, every university in Finland uses Stack, right? And a whole bunch of other universities, including University of Edinburgh. And so we contributed stuff. There is this difficulty, there's this basic difficulty in providing example materials, because on the one hand, these are our course materials, and that's what we are teaching with. So there is a limit to the extent to which we're just going to provide all our own course materials to the world for free. And even if we were willing to share those with colleagues, there's a limit to the extent to which we'd put them freely available on public access websites, because some of these things contain assessed coursework. So we just can't do that. So we will share some things, but my model is that we should collaborate on the infrastructure, and then you're free to do with this what you will. Stack was designed for and is strongest on these method-based courses with calculus and algebra. That's where it's come from, and there will be a limit to how far we can get, and there will be a law of diminishing returns, I think, and that's where we are. Okay, other questions? Yeah, question and answer is always difficult when you're facing a screen and not able to read the room. So a couple of people have posted in the chat. So what I propose to do is we have a group of colleagues from Edinburgh. So perhaps George, if you could put the Edinburgh folk into a breakout room, we'll talk more specifically about our internal project that we've got in mind here. I'll be around online for the next 20 minutes for colleagues if you want to ask questions. I'm very happy to take questions by email later. This is not going to answer all your questions straight away, but we just wanted to run a follow-up session to this morning. So I guess if there are no more questions from you folks, then good luck, keep in touch, and we'll wrap this up now. But I will move into a breakout room with the Edinburgh folk, and we can talk there.